The young Marines burst into laughter when they saw the old veteran's rusty rifle. "That rusty junk won't even fire, Grandpa." But when the distinctive ping of his M1 Garand's empty clip echoed across the range after 8 perfect shots, the laughter died instantly, and even the general stopped his inspection to witness what was happening. Staff Sergeant Marcus Thompson, 24 years old and cocky as they come, was the top marksman at Marine Corps Base Camp Pendleton. His state-of-the-art M27 infantry automatic rifle, equipped with advanced optics and every modern modification imaginable, had helped him set multiple base records. He looked down on anything that wasn't cutting-edge military technology. The Friday morning training session was routine until 73-year-old Hank Kim walked onto the rifle range carrying what appeared to be a relic from a museum. The M1 Garand showed every one of its 75 years. Rust spots dotted the metal. The wooden stock was weathered and worn, and the overall appearance suggested a weapon that belonged in a display case, not on an active firing range. Hank moved slowly, but with purpose, his weathered hands handling the old rifle with the familiarity that came from decades of experience. He wore simple civilian clothes, khaki pants, a plain white shirt, and a worn baseball cap that gave no indication of his military background. "Jesus Christ," Thompson whispered to his spotter, Corporal Jake Martinez. "Look what crawled out of the retirement home." But what he didn't know yet. The rifle range at Camp Pendleton was one of the most advanced training facilities in the Corps, designed to prepare Marines for modern combat scenarios. The young Marines were practicing with their high-tech weapons, achieving respectable scores, but nothing exceptional. Thompson had been showing off all morning, hitting targets at 500 meters with his sophisticated rifle system. His teammates were impressed, and several had gathered to watch what they considered a masterclass in modern marksmanship. When Hank approached the range master to request permission to use the facility, the young Marines stopped their training to watch what they expected to be an embarrassing display of obsolete weaponry. "Sir, this is an active military training range," Range Master Gunnery Sergeant Rodriguez explained professionally. "Do you have authorization to be here?" Hank reached into his shirt pocket and produced a faded military ID card. Rodriguez examined it carefully, his expression shifting as he read the credentials. "Yes, sir, Mr. Kim. You're cleared for the range. Will you need any targets or ammunition?" "No, thank you, Gunny. I brought my own." That's when everything changed. Thompson walked over to get a closer look at Hank's rifle, his expression a mixture of amusement and disbelief. "Holy shit! Is that thing even safe to fire?" Thompson asked loudly enough for his squad to hear. "It looks like it's been sitting in someone's garage since World War II." Hank looked up at the young Marine with patient eyes. "She's been with me since Korea, son. Still shoots straight when she needs to." "Korea." Corporal Martinez laughed as he joined the conversation. "That rusty junk won't even fire, Grandpa. You sure that thing isn't going to blow up in your face?" Private First Class Davis, the youngest member of Thompson's squad, pointed at the rust spots on Hank's rifle. "Sir, maybe you should consider getting a new rifle. Technology has come a long way since the Stone Age." The other Marines gathered around, drawn by the spectacle of an elderly civilian with equipment that looked like it belonged in a museum rather than on an active firing range. "Tell you what, Pops," Thompson said with the arrogance of youth. "Why don't you watch how real Marines handle modern warfare? Then maybe head over to the antique show where that thing belongs." Hank simply nodded and stepped back to observe as Thompson's squad demonstrated their skills with their advanced weapon systems. The biggest shock was still coming. Thompson took position at the 500-meter firing line with his M27, its advanced optics gleaming in the California sun. He was in his element, ready to show this old-timer how modern Marines operated. "Watch and learn, Grandpa," Thompson called out as he settled into his shooting position. Thompson fired a series of precise shots, his electronic systems helping him achieve consistent accuracy. His squad cheered with each hit, and several other Marines had stopped their training to watch the demonstration. 10 hits out of 10 rounds at 500 meters, Thompson announced proudly as he stood up from the firing line. "That's how it's done with real equipment." The assembled Marines applauded, and Thompson basked in the attention. "Think your antique can match that?" Thompson asked, looking directly at Hank. Hank stepped forward quietly. "I'd like to try, if you don't mind." The laughter from the Marines was immediate and loud. "This should be good," Martinez muttered to his teammates. "Somebody get a camera," Davis added. "This is going to be hilarious." But wait, there's more. Hank walked to the 500-meter firing line, his rusty M1 Garand looking almost primitive compared to the high-tech weapons the Marines carried. The rifle showed its age in every detail: scratched metal, worn wood, and an overall appearance that suggested it had seen better decades. Rangemaster Rodriguez called for a ceasefire and cleared the adjacent lanes. Despite his professional demeanor, even he was curious to see how this would play out. "You sure about this, sir?" Rodriguez asked quietly. "That's a long shot for equipment of that vintage." "I understand, Gunny. Just want to see if I still remember how." Hank took position at the firing line, his aged body settling into a shooting stance that was textbook perfect. Despite his years, his form was flawless, suggesting muscle memory developed over decades of practice. Thompson and his squad watched with barely concealed amusement, expecting the old rifle to misfire or the elderly man to embarrass himself with poor marksmanship. Hank loaded an 8-round en-bloc clip into his M1 Garand with practiced efficiency. The distinctive metallic sound of the clip seating properly was audible across the range. "Ready when you are, sir," Rodriguez announced. What happened next surprised everyone. Hank settled behind his rifle, his breathing becoming slow and controlled. For a moment, the mocking voices of the young Marines faded away, and he was transported to a frozen hillside in Korea, where precision shooting had meant the difference between life and death for the men in his unit. His first shot rang out across the range, the sound of the old Garand distinctly different from the modern weapons the Marines were used to hearing. "Hit!" Rodriguez called out, checking the target through binoculars. "Center mass." Thompson's smile wavered slightly, but he maintained his confidence. "Lucky shot. Let's see him do it again." Hank worked the semi-automatic action smoothly and fired his second shot. "Hit!" Rodriguez announced again. "Upper center." The casual chatter among the Marines began to quiet, as they realized this wasn't going to be the comedy show they had expected. Third shot. Hit. Fourth shot. Hit. By the fifth shot, the range had gone completely silent except for the methodical firing of Hank's M1 Garand. Sixth shot. Hit. Seventh shot. Hit. Thompson felt his confidence evaporating as he watched the elderly man with the rusty junk systematically outperform his modern equipment. Eighth shot. Hit. Then came the sound that every military historian and weapons enthusiast recognized, the distinctive metallic ping of an M1 Garand's empty en-bloc clip being ejected from the rifle. If stories of incredible skill, timeless weapons, and the veterans who mastered them decades ago inspire you. Make sure to subscribe to our channel. We share these powerful reminders that experience and dedication can triumph over youth and technology, and that some skills are never forgotten. Hit that subscribe button to witness more amazing stories of American heroes. The real surprise was the ping of Hank's empty clip echoed across the suddenly silent range like a gunshot in a cathedral. Every Marine present knew that sound from history books and movies, but hearing it in person from an actual combat veteran was something entirely different. "All hits," Rodriguez announced, his voice carrying a new tone of respect. 8 for 8 at 500 meters. Thompson stared in disbelief. Not only had the old man matched his performance, but he had done it with a rifle that was older than most of the Marines watching. "That's impossible," Davis whispered. "That rifle is ancient." But Hank wasn't finished. He calmly loaded another on-block clip and settled back into his shooting position. "Sir," Rodriguez said, "you've already proven your point." "Just want to make sure it wasn't a fluke, Gunny," Hank replied with a slight smile. The second string of 8 shots was even more impressive than the first. Each round found its mark with mechanical precision, and when the second ping rang out, the target showed 8 more perfect hits. Word was spreading rapidly throughout the base. Marines from other training areas were arriving to witness what was becoming a legendary shooting demonstration. Colonel Patricia Hayes, commanding officer of the base's weapons training battalion, received a call in her office about the extraordinary event taking place at the range. "Ma'am, you need to see this," her aide reported urgently. "We have a civilian on the range who's shooting perfect scores with what appears to be a museum piece." That's when the phone rang. Colonel Hayes immediately headed for the range, arriving to find hundreds of Marines gathered around a single shooter who was methodically destroying targets with mechanical precision. As she approached, she could hear the distinctive sound of an M1 Garand firing, followed by the metallic ping of an empty clip. It was a sound she had only heard in historical documentaries. "What's the situation here?" Colonel Hayes asked Rodriguez. "Ma'am, we have Henry Kim, Korean War veteran, currently shooting perfect scores at 500 meters with a 1943 M1 Garand." Colonel Hayes watched as Hank fired his third string of 8 shots, each one finding its mark with the same precision as the previous 16. "How many rounds has he fired?" 24 rounds, 24 hits, ma'am." No misses. The colonel pulled out her phone and called the base commander. This was something General Morrison needed to see personally. Everyone learned the truth, but the real shock. General Morrison arrived at the range with his staff just as Hank was preparing for his 4th string of shots. The crowd of Marines parted respectfully as the base's commanding officer approached the firing line. "Mr. Kim," Colonel Hayes said, introducing the veteran to the general. "This is General Morrison, base commander." Hank stood and extended his hand. "General, sir. Honor to meet you." General Morrison examined Hank's rifle with professional interest. "That's a beautiful weapon, Mr. Kim." 1943 Springfield Armory. "Yes, sir. Serial number shows she was manufactured in October 1943. Been with me since Chosin Reservoir." The general's expression changed immediately. Chosin Reservoir was one of the most brutal battles in Marine Corps history, fought in sub-zero temperatures against overwhelming Chinese forces. "You were at Chosin?" "Yes, sir. 1st Marines, Fox Company. This rifle and I held Hill 1081 for 3 days." General Morrison had studied the Chosin Reservoir campaign extensively. The Marines who fought there were legends, and the men who survived were among the toughest warriors the Corps had ever produced. Mr. Kim, would you be willing to share some of your experiences with our young Marines? I think they could learn a great deal from you. Thompson and his squad, who had been listening to this exchange with growing embarrassment, finally understood who they had been mocking. But the final shock was still coming. "Gunny Rodriguez," General Morrison called out. "What's Mr. Kim's shooting performance today?" "Sir, 24 rounds fired, 24 hits at 500 meters. Perfect score." The general turned to address the assembled Marines. "Gentlemen, you are witnessing something extraordinary. Mr. Kim is not just any Korean War veteran. He's a survivor of the Chosin Reservoir, one of the most brutal battles in our Corps' history." The Marines listened in stunned silence as the general continued. "At Chosin, Marines like Mr. Kim fought in temperatures of -40 degrees against overwhelming odds. They held their positions against waves of enemy attacks, and they did it with weapons like that M1 Garand." General Morrison pointed to Hank's rifle. "That weapon has seen more combat than all of your modern rifles combined, and the man holding it has more experience with precision shooting under pressure than most Marines will ever accumulate." Thompson felt sick to his stomach as he realized the magnitude of his disrespect. "Mr. Kim," the general continued, "would you be willing to demonstrate the rapid-fire capabilities of the M1 Garand? I think our Marines would benefit from seeing how their predecessors fought." Hank nodded and returned to the firing line. This time, instead of deliberate precision shots, he demonstrated the M1 Garand's semi-automatic capability, firing all 8 rounds in rapid succession. The shots came so fast, they almost sounded like automatic fire, but each round found its mark. The final ping of the ejected clip seemed to punctuate a masterclass in combat marksmanship. The demonstration concluded with thunderous applause from the assembled Marines. But the most important moment came when Thompson approached Hank. "Sir," Thompson said, his voice thick with emotion, "I owe you the deepest apology of my life. What I said about your rifle, about your capabilities, I was completely wrong." Hank looked at the young Marine with understanding eyes. "Son, you couldn't have known. But maybe next time, you might consider that old doesn't always mean obsolete." The transformation that followed would become legendary at Camp Pendleton. Word of Hank's shooting demonstration spread throughout the Marine Corps within hours. Videos of the event were shared across every social media platform, becoming a viral sensation that reminded Americans of the warriors who had served before the age of high-tech weaponry. General Morrison immediately invited Hank to become a civilian marksmanship instructor at Camp Pendleton, an offer he accepted with the condition that he could continue using his rusty M1 Garand. Thompson and his squad requested personal instruction from Hank, leading to a complete overhaul of their shooting fundamentals and a new appreciation for the basics of marksmanship. The M1 Garand, that had been mocked as rusty junk, was placed on permanent display in the base museum with a plaque reading, "Henry Kim, Korean War veteran, 32 consecutive hits at 500 meters, proving that skill transcends technology." Most importantly, Hank's demonstration became a mandatory part of Marine Corps marksmanship training, teaching young Marines that equipment was only as good as the person using it. Thompson kept a photo on his desk from that day, showing Hank in mid-shot with his M1 Garand. It served as a daily reminder that respect should be given before it was earned, and that wisdom often came in humble packages. The distinctive ping of the M1 Garand's empty clip became a sound that every Marine at Camp Pendleton associated with excellence, precision, and the warrior spirit that transcended generations. Years later, when Thompson became an instructor himself, he would tell new recruits about the day an elderly Korean War veteran had taught them that the most advanced weapon was worthless without the skill, discipline, and experience to use it effectively. Hank continued to visit the range regularly, not to set more records, but to teach young Marines that marksmanship was about fundamentals, not technology. His rusty M1 Garand continued to outperform rifles costing 10 times as much, proving that in the right hands, age and experience could still triumph over youth and innovation. The range where Hank had silenced the Marines with his shooting became known as Kim's Range, and every Marine who trained there learned about the man who had proved that respect for veterans should never be based on the age of their equipment, but on the depth of their experience. And every time the metallic ping of an M1 Garand echoed across that range, Marines were reminded that some sounds never lose their power to command respect, and some warriors never lose their ability to amaze. Sometimes the most important lessons come from being completely humbled by someone you thought you could dismiss, and sometimes the oldest tools in the most experienced hands can still teach the youngest warriors what excellence really looks like.